Hello there and welcome to Luminar NEO All Sliders Explained, the show where we describe and explain you every single slider in this powerful photo editing application. Now, if you've never been here before, my name is Jakub and I'm a creator and founder of Clever Photographer. Now, before we're going to start, I have a few things I want to cover. First of all, at the end of the video, we're going to give you our own and very popular Luminar NEO shortcut cheat sheet. So stay until the end so you can get your own copy. The second, if you want to follow us along, make sure you head into the description, follow the link there and get your sample files before we're going to start. If you don't own Luminar NEO, you can also follow the link in the description and use our own discount code Clever Photographer. That way you get additional 20% off and you can get your own copy. And finally, we want to ask you to like and comment on our videos and also follow our channel so we can keep creating content like this. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use curves in Luminar NEO. Now, in the photography world, the curves can be made as complicated as it gets. However, I believe that at the end of this tutorial, you're going to be comfortable to use them as a part of your photo editing workflow. So as you can see, once again, we are in Luminar NEO and we are starting in a catalog module. We are again looking at our sample files, and as always, if you want to follow me along and do the edit on your own computer, you can download them by following the link in the description of this video. Now we're going to be starting with this autumn image, so just click on it, select it, and move it to the edit module by hitting E on your keyboard or clicking on the edit on the top of your screen. Now first question is, where are the curves? So there are two tools you can find them. One would be in the Develop Raw tool, which you can only access when you're editing raw files. And the second is in your Develop tool, both of them located in the Essentials part of our main toolbar. Simply click on a tool to open it and look for the third tab with the curves. Click on it to open it, and here we have the curve in front of us. So we're going to be starting with the simple RGB curve, which is the very first one, and we're going to be looking at the curve starting with the 4 most important points that you need to know and learn about curve. Everything on the right of our curve represents the bright pixels. In the opposite, everything on the left side represents the dark pixels. Now there's 2 more things you need to know. When you go up with the curve, you make things brighter or add, and when you go down with the curve, you make things darker or subtract. So let me show you what I mean by that. So let's look at the image and let's say that we want to make the brighter parts of our image, or in our language, the highlights, even brighter. So for this, we're going to make a point all the way on the top, which again is in the zone of our bright pixels. So we make the point and we simply drag the point up. So we're making the bright parts of our image brighter. And now, in the opposite of that, we want to make our darker points darker. So for that, we're going to make point on the lower part of our curve and more towards the left. And we're going to drag it down. Something like this. Now we want to keep an eye on the image. We don't want to overdo it. However, something like this is fine. So once again, we have taken our bright part, all the highlights, and we made them brighter by bringing the curve up. And then we have taken our darker parts or shadows and we have brought them down, so we have made them darker. Now looking at the curve, you can see a perfect example of the classic S-curve. So the S on the curve. Now the S-curve represents the most basic contrast. Because what is contrast? We make brighter parts brighter and the darker parts darker. Now, how to reset the curve? There are 2 ways to do this. If you haven't used any other tools in this tool, you can simply go to the top of your tool and all the way on the right is the little icon where you can simply click and reset the tool. Let's repeat it. Let's just make quickly the S-curve. If you have used other tools, which is often the case, you may be done a little bit in the light, maybe a little bit in the blacks and whites. What you need to do is simply double click on the points and they will disappear and the curve will reset to its original value. Now I want to show you another thing. What if I would want to make my dark pixels or shadows darker without impacting the bright pixels, so the highlights? Well, it would be very simple. First of all, what we want to do again, we want to take our dark pixels or shadows and make them brighter, so brighten them up. However, as we do that, you can see that the curve follows and it's making everything else brighter. So for this, we want to make another point on our highlights or the brighter pixels and simply bring it down. If that's not enough, if you're not happy, you can always make another point in the middle and again bring it in line with the original curve. So this way, we're only making our darker parts brighter and we're not affecting anything else. Of course, you can always go back and adjust the setting of the curve depending what you're looking for. Now there is one more thing I wanted to show you before we move to the other curves, and that's the before and after. Don't forget about the eye icon on the top of your tool where you can simply click and see the before and after, as it is really important when you're working with the curve to see the progress of what you're doing. So again, we have our reset tool and the before and after. So let's reset the tool and let's go back to our curves. Now it's time to talk about the individual channels that represents the RGB, or the red, green and blue. They are located next to our average curve and you can simply move between them just by clicking on them. Let's start from the red, and the first thing you need to know when you're working with these channels are the opposite colors of your RGB, or the red, green and blue. The opposite of RGB is the CMY. So the opposite of red is your cyan, or C. The opposite of your green is your magenta, or M. And the opposite of your blue is your yellow, Y. Why we need to know this? On the beginning, I was explaining you that when you go up with your curve, you add, and when you go down with your curve, you remove or subtract. So let me show you what I mean by that. So let's say that we want to add more red color into the highlights or into the brighter parts of the image. Well, first of all, let's move to our curve. And as we talk about the brighter parts, we right away know that we need to go towards the right side of our curve. There, we need to make a point. And now, because we want to add the red color, not remove it, we want to take the point and drag it up. Now keep an eye on the brighter parts, on the leaves and everywhere. Can you see how we're getting more and more red? Excellent. That's because we're taking the point up and adding the red. Now let's make it a little bit more natural. And let's say that we want to bring cyan into the dark parts of the image. So the darker parts, we want to make and add to it a little bit of the cyan. So the opposite of the red is a cyan. So by removing the red, we're going to add a cyan. So for this, let's make a point on our left side, because we're talking about dark parts. And let's drag the point down until we like the result. So something like this. So we're dragging the point down because we are removing the red. And because we're removing the red, we're adding the cyan to it. So I hope this is really clear. However, just to make sure, let's try another example. Let's reset those points. And let's say that we want to add yellow into the extreme bright areas of the image. So for this, we're going to go into our blue channel. And our extreme bright areas are all the way on the right. So we can really just use this point and handle here. Now, as we want to add yellow into the bright areas, we want to remove the blue from this area. We want to take the point and simply drag it down. As far as you want, it's really up to you. Now, of course, we're going to make it a little bit over the board. However, you get the idea. Now let's reset it. And for this image, we're just going to go back to our RGB channel where I'll show you one more thing. And that's how to create the nice fade effect. So in this channel, we can create one point on the top and just make the brighter parts a little bit brighter. Then we're going to create another points on our darker parts and make them again a little bit darker, creating a nice contrast. But what we want to do, we want to create the fade effect. And what is fade effect? That's a little bit of brightness in the darkest part of the image. So by me saying that, you should already be able to adjust it yourself. However, it's really simple. We're going to take our point in the darkest part of the image, which is the extreme left, and we simply going to bring it up. So by doing that, if you keep an eye on an image, and I purposely overdone it, you can see how we're making and adding the fade to the image. Now, of course, you can adjust it. You don't have to go that high. And you can also add a little bit of contrast in the rest of the darker parts, just to make the effect a little bit more natural. So those are the basics for using the curves. Of course that you can stop now. However, I have a few more things I want to show you so you can use the tools to its full advantage. So let's reset everything. Again, we're just going to use the reset tool button on the top. And first, let's talk about the curves again. So looking at it from the left, that's where there is a point 0, brightness 0. So basically 100% black. Then we're going to move across the curves all the way to the end where we have a brightness 255, so the point 255, and that results in 100% white. So we have 100% black, that's a point 0, 100% white, that's a point 255. Now in the middle, we have the point with the number 128, which represents the 50% gray. So as you can imagine, we have our black, and then we go through the line, through the different grays, 50% gray, and then we end up in a white. Equally, going the other way around, you have your point 0, and then when we go all the way up, you have your point 255, again representing the 100% white. Now by going through this, and the reason why I went through this is to explain you why is the curve diagonal. So let me show you why. Well, when we take our extreme white point all the way up, we know that here it's 255, 100% white. We also know that here, on this part, it's also 255 brightness, so 100% white. So we can make our extreme white point darker by bringing the curve down. However, we cannot make that point any brighter. And the reason being is that you cannot make something that is 100% white any whiter. And then when you follow the curve down, and following the same method and same idea, we have our 0% brightness or 100% black. And you can make that area brighter, of course, as you saw on the fade. However, you cannot make something that is 100% black any blacker. So that's why the curve is diagonal, and that's why it has this shape. Now the reason why I told you all of this is that I wanted you to be able to use also the sliders at the bottom of your curve. Now to be able to use it, we need another sample file. So let's jump back into our catalog module and select the image with the lady. After that, once you select it, again, let's go back into our edit module. And here in the edit module, we're gonna go back to our develop tool. We are back in our curves and again in our RGB curve. Now the good thing is that we can see our histogram here. If you don't see it here, it's on the top of your screen as well. Now looking at the histogram, you can see that there are no data all the way up here. And when you look at the other side of the histogram, the brighter part, you can also see that there are no data all the way up here. So basically we are very much mid-tones and mid-histogram oriented. And this is why the image is looking so washed out. Now that's an artistic decision, there is nothing wrong about it, but the reason is that when we get to the first pixels, the brightness of those pixels are already higher than the black. So basically it's missing the black points and white points. So how would we fix this? Or fix this? How would we adjust this? How would we make the picture stand out a little more? Well, it's really simple. We're just gonna take our point down here and we're gonna drag it closer to the histogram. Again, we can go a little bit closer and that's about it. Now let's have a look at the before and after. Before and after. And can you see how we're getting more contrast and punch in the image already? I think it's great. Now, whenever you're working with these sliders down here, when you're working with the slider on the left and slider on the right, the good idea is to bring on your clipping mask. You do that by hitting J on your keyboard. And what it really does is it makes sure that we see when we go overboard with our blacks or whites. Let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to take my point here. I'm still on the darks and blacks. And I'm going to drag it into the image. I will keep dragging. And if I overdo it and I over darken the image, all the areas that are extremely underexposed and dark will get this blue overlay. So that's obviously too much. So we want to bring the point back until all the blue disappear. In my case, I really want to make it black only from start of the histogram. So somewhere around here. Similarly, when I go on the other side and I'm going to be adjusting the white points because I want the side of my histogram start with the white. I don't want it to start with some shade of gray. So I'm going to take this point, drag it closer towards the side. And again, if I overdo it and push it, I will get this time a red overlay. So everything that is overexposed, lost the data, will get this red overlay. So obviously we overdone it. So let's bring it back until all the red disappear. And again, in my case, I will only bring it on the edge of the histogram. So what we done is we have made sure that the image is starting from 100% black and ending on 100% white. So now you know everything you need to know about the curves. You know the difference between the different channels, you know how to use all the different points, which part of the curve represent what, and you also know how to use the little sliders on the bottom. Now I have two more things I want to show you, and for this again we're going to use another image. So let's go back to the catalog and pick the final image to edit. After that, again, let's hit E on our keyboard and bring it into Edit module. So with this last sample file, I want to show you how to use curves and masking. So the idea on this image is that we're going to add green tint to the background and the surrounding of the dancer, while we're going to keep the dancer and her skin tones untouched. So for this project, let's go back to our main toolbar, open the Develop tool, and open the curves. In the curves, we're going to move to the green channel, where we start by editing the shadows. So again, we adjusting shadows, the darker parts, so we are on the left side of our curve. Make the point there, and as we want to add green, we're going to print the point up. Now as you can see, we're adding the green. Let's have a look for the highlights. We're going to create one point there, and we can see if we want to add or maybe remove a little bit of the green, but I think something like this is looking good. So we have added the green. Now I think the next thing we want to do is add a little bit of contrast. So for this again, we're going to go into our RGB curve and we're going to make a simple S-curve. So starting from the top, we're going to make our brighter parts a little bit brighter, and we're going to make our darker parts a little bit darker. So something like this. Let's have a look at the before and after, and so far so good. So now, because of course our sliders are affecting the body and the skin tones of the dancer, we want to mask them out. So we're going to use the masking on the same tool, and we have a multiple different ways we can do this. However, as we have the mask AI here, we can click on that and wait until the Luminar will find the objects on the picture. Once it's finished, it will give us the option to select the human. So let's do that. Let's select the human. Again, it usually takes few seconds, and once it's finished, it does the selection of the human. Now it's nowhere perfect, but it's a good starting point. However, what really happened, if we go back, is that it added the green just to the dancer, and the rest of it became the same as before. So what we want to do, we simply want to invert the mask. So let's go back to our develop, and we're still in masking, and all the way at the bottom there is a mask action. Click on it to open it, and simply click on invert. So now we have everything green except the dancer. Of course, that what you would do now is to use a brush and adjust the mask. So we can use something like a paint, and then simply zoom in and start with the adjustments. If you want to see the mask, you can also go back and simply go into the mask action and click on show. Then go back to your brush, adjust the brush, adjust the softness, adjust the size, and maybe even a strength. We can start with something like 80. And now we're just gonna paint the green into the areas where we need to. Now it can take a little longer, so I'm not gonna do it. However, it gives you the idea of what we're trying to do. Of course, that you can take as much time home and do all of this properly. However, this just gives you the idea what we're trying to do. Let's go back. Let's go in the mask action, remove it, jump into the adjustments, and that's where we are. Now, before I let you go, I want to show you one more cool tip. Let's reset the develop tool and our curves. And remember how we were using the green curve to add the green color into our shadows and a little bit of our highlights? Well, if you're not 100% comfortable to use the curves for this, there is another great tool in Luminar NEO that you can use to create exactly the same effect. So let me show you. Let's close the curves, let's close the develop tool, and let's head all the way to the bottom to the professional tools. Here we want to open the color harmony, and in the color harmony, I want you to open the color balance. In the color balance, there is a drop-down box. So let's just open it. In the drop-down box, you have 3 options: shadows, midtones, and highlights. Now remember our curve. Everything on the left represents the darker parts of our image and represents the shadows. Everything in the middle, with our 50% gray, represents the midtones. And everything all the way on the right represents the highlights, the bright parts of our image. So let's say, again, looking at the image, that we want to add green into our shadows, just like we did that earlier. Now, instead of going into the curve, we're going to go into our magenta green slider, and that gives us the same option as the curve would give us. So we can add green into the darker parts of our image or into the shadows. How cool is this? You don't have to go into the curve, you can just use the sliders here. Now again, what we done earlier, we have added a little bit of green into the highlights. So we switch to the highlights in our drop-down box, and here we're going to increase the green in the highlights, just like this. You could also do the opposite. You could actually drag the slider down and add a little bit of magenta into the highlights, which actually brings the skin tones back. How cool is that? So if you're not comfortable to use the separate channels on our curves, you can simply jump into our color harmony tool, use the color balance, and do very similar adjustment as you would do in the curves. So this was my little secret tip on how you can make your life easier. However, I still hope that everything I told you about the curves was helpful and that you're gonna start to use them with your next edit. So now it's time to get your own Luminar NEO shortcut cheat sheet. All you have to do is to head to our website cleverphotography.com/luminargift and get it right now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had fun and I hope you learned something new. Please don't forget to follow our channel and also check out our other videos covering Luminar NEO. For today, thank you very much for watching. My name was Jakub and I can't wait to see you in the next one.